Coming to you live from the palatial studios of PBJ Productions. Welcome to Patrick and BJ Talk Real Estate, where we talk about life, the universe, and everything as it relates to real estate. Hey everybody, it's BJ.
And Patrick.
And we're back talking all things real estate. And not sure when you're going to see this, but for us, we're rolling right into the start of spring. And here's a good thing about today that maybe not everybody knows, but I'm a sports fan, so I know these things. Today is the opening day of the baseball season. And, for a lot of people, they're like, whatever, I'm not a sports fan, or so what does that really matter? It just, for me, it's one of those things that says it's springtime. And now,
signifies spring.
Right? It's spring, and it's the start of the whole, baseball season and summer and everything else. So, for those of you that are watching at different times of the year, welcome to spring, officially the start of the baseball season today. So, if we decided to talk about sports, I could do that for hours, but let's jump over to the world of real estate.
Yeah, we're going to talk about more terms that are commonly asked about. So we're going to help explain them. And, we sort of ask some questions around those terms to give some context to them as well so people understand. So I'm going to be reading off the terms, BJ is going to be explaining, and I'm going to ask some filler questions. So
okay,
there we go. The first one is acceptance.
Yeah, I accept you.
Thank you. I feel accepted.
Isn't that?
But when it comes to real estate, when it comes to contracts, when it comes to the whole process of buying and selling real estate,
right? When
a realtor says, "Oh, your offer's been accepted,"
yeah, so it means that. So in that context, it means that, let's say I'm acting for the buyer. So when they say we've accepted your offer, that means that the terms that we just sent you. So we could have been back and forth a few times or whatever it is, but the latest terms that we have just sent you in the latest contract we just sent you, the seller has agreed to, and now we can continue on with our due diligence.
So that's like an official agreement at that point.
Yeah. Right. And I think we talked about it in a different episode where we talked about the difference between a conditional and unconditional offer. But the acceptance is the first part before we get to conditions and the process and things like that.
You've written your offer. You might have been negotiating back and forth, whatever the case may be.
Right. Yeah.
Awesome.
Okay.
Well,
I feel accepted.
We talked about completion dates. I'll accept your answer.
Okay.
We talked about completion dates and possession dates, but we never talked about what the adjustment date is.
Yeah, so the adjustment date is the date that the taxes start ticking on the buyer's side of the ledger. So up until that point, property taxes are payable by the seller. As of the adjustment date, now property taxes are going to be payable on the buyer's side.
On the new owner.
That's right.
Yeah. On
the new owner side of the equation. And the insurance and all of those things we want to have them, set up as well.
Right. Could that also include other costs that, let's say it's a condo, strata?
Yeah. Strata fees are going to, flip over at the same time. And
so depending on what day of the month or what for property taxes, exactly, it depends on like what time of year if the property taxes have already been paid. But exactly what you're saying, the responsibility turns over to the new owner at that time.
Yeah, and if the property taxes for the year have already been paid, typically the lawyers will make an adjustment. So
the adjustment date, yes.
Right, so that now you, the buyer, have paid some portion for the year that has already been paid, and it goes back to the seller.
So this is probably good to sort of talk about a little bit, where maybe if the strata fee has already been paid for the month.
Right.
The property taxes have already been paid for the month.
Right.
So let's say you paid X amount for the house. The actual amount that you owe on the completion date, the day the title transfers, the money transfers, is not exactly the same as what you might have agreed on because
there's going to be the tax adjustment and the strata adjustments and all of those things. Yeah.
So sometimes you have to plan for either for more, or if they've already, if it's going to be either a credit to the total price or a debit to the total price.
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Agency disclosure.
Agency disclosure. Well,
What does that mean?
so agency. Well, okay. So first of all, it means that we, the agent, are going to explain to our client or our potential client what they can expect. And what does agency means? It means that you are asking me to represent you in the real estate transaction. So there are certain things that you can expect from me. If we have an agency relationship, I owe you certain duties of confidentiality, loyalty.
As a client.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to have that conversation with you about, protecting your negotiating position and privacy and things like disclosing to you all relevant facts and any material latent defects and all of those kind of things. So agency really talks about I'm going to represent you, the client, and what you can expect from me as part of that representation.
Right. So this sounds like it defines the relationship between the realtor and the client.
Yeah.
Does this apply to someone else in the public? Like, let's say somebody came to an open house and there's a realtor there, and that person might be asking some questions.
Well, you can come. So here's the thing. If you come to an open house and you ask me factual questions, I can answer those factual questions without the requirement of any disclosure of agency or without entering into an agency relationship. When you ask me things that are questions of value and opinion, now we start to, okay, well, we need to have this conversation so we understand what, how this works. If I'm going to, and I've said to people before at my own open houses when they come through that, I can answer any factual questions that you have about this property. But if you ask me about what do I think of the price or, what's the value or anything like that, I'm going to tell you that, I act for the seller. And so your best bet is to engage an agent and I can help you with that.
Right. So you get on it right away. Hi, nice day. Nice to meet you. Welcome to my open house. By the way, I can only answer these questions.
Some variation
sort of like,
of that. Yeah.
Yeah, you get on it pretty quick.
So they know right away because, they need to. I remember when it first switched over, the whole, we're in 2018, we're doing away with dual agency and you have to make these disclosures all the time. And we were a little over the top, right? As far as protecting ourselves as agents.
Absolutely, yeah, because you could get in. That's where agents could get in trouble.
Right.
Yeah.
So there was I remember putting signs on the doors of my open houses, basically just point form. I represent the.
Oh, you were like super clear about it. Oh wow, I never did that, but I would at least get into the conversation if it went in that direction. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I was advised at that point, probably by my managing broker, just to err on the side of
caution all the time.
Yeah, and especially at that point because it was such a big change from what we were doing before, and there were so many moving pieces. Yeah.
But that gets into a whole. That's a deeper conversation. I want to save that for another time.
Yeah.
When it comes to like representing, or maybe not giving representation to a party, but you're facilitating the transaction on both on behalf of the seller with an unrepresented party on the other side. That's a whole different thing.
Yeah, that is. Yeah.
But let's keep moving down the list.
Okay.
How about an amendment?
So an amendment is anything additionally. You can write an amendment, I guess, as soon as you put the contract in somebody else's hand. Hey, we have an amendment to that contract. But an amendment essentially is that it changes the existing contract. So maybe you have an amendment to the contract where you've done an inspection and you found that I don't know, pick something that the roof,
it's infested with gremlins.
Yeah, whatever.
Something's wrong with it.
And we have determined that okay, there's a value associated with getting those gremlins out, and we have had some kind of conversation between buyer and seller and agent and so forth to say, okay, we've agreed at a number. So we arrived at a number. Let's say we're gonna
This is renegotiating the original agreed to accepted offer.
right.
Yeah.
That's what an amendment does. Is it amends the existing offer, and so we would write back in that buyer and seller agree that price is reduced to this number.
Yeah.
And we can say why or not, but it's just essentially the amendment is just that it's amending the contract. It's changing something in the contract.
Okay, great. What about an appraisal?
So there's a couple of parts to to an appraisal. There's tax appraisals, and then there's appraisals that the banks will do. And typically a bank is looking, and they don't always do like physically send someone to the property to look at them because they've got the recent sales, they've got their own, information and so forth. But an appraisal is essentially the bank, insurance company, somebody sending somebody to look at a property and determine a value for that property.
Right. So when we talking about an appraisal, or when people typically hear about that, we're talking about an actual appraisal from the bank or insurance or somebody else.
Yeah, and they'll use a third party. Typically, the bank's not sending. They don't have somebody on staff to do appraisals, but they'll have a third party let's say in Victoria.
Appraisal company.
Yeah, and they'll send them out on commercial deals. We'll bring in appraisers. Just to do an appraisal of whether it's the land or an appraisal of all the equipment that's involved in the sale of a business, or that kind of thing also. And sometimes we'll do that right up front, where it's to give to show the value to a potential buyer.
Okay, that'll lead me into, I want to cap it off on this last one.
Yeah.
So we have like a bank appraisal, or which would be from an appraisal company.
Yeah.
And I'm asked for an appraisal to do an appraisal on somebody's property. But this is going to lead me to this one. What is a comparative market analysis?
Yeah, no. So see, now that's different.
So that's what
it's the same but different. How's that?
That's why I wanted to bring it up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when we do a CMA,
comparative
market analysis, we're going to look at the most recent sales, and essentially the CMA says what are similar properties selling for. Most, in the most recent sales in this area, what are the similar properties selling for in this building, on this street, in this, subdivision, whatever it might be. And we would use those numbers when we're talking about a market analysis to say, here's what we have seen for the sales. Here's what we know about what's happening in terms of the market trends and everything else right now. Here's what we have for listings right now in the area. Here's what didn't sell. And, we'll break all those things down and try and identify from that. Here's a range that we think is a good range to consider in the selling of a property. And, typically when I give clients a range, I have what I call it the Prince Charming price.
Okay.
Right? This is if Prince Charming comes through the door,
right,
they're going to overpay this much.
Yeah.
Right? And, it's funny. I actually years ago did a CMA for somebody. And after we went through and I, showed him my rationale for everything and so on. And he spent quite a bit of time taking me through the house, telling me about how, all the extras that he did when he built it, with right down to the bolts that they used and everything. Right. And so I gave him the range and everything else. And I said, here's where we're at, I think, as far as explain to him the Prince Charming concept and everything. And he actually said to me, he said, no, I think that a foreign buyer will pay $100,000 more than that, your top price.
Better than your Prince Charming.
Right.
So this is like Prince Charming from somewhere else.
Yeah.
Price.
Wow. It's like Prince Charming is drunk.
Oh.
And so Prince Charming's coming to overpay.
Poor Prince Charming.
Right?
Yeah, okay.
So that's the top end.
Oh boy. Okay, that's a great analogy. I like that.
Okay, and then at the other end we have, I call it the fire sale price.
Right. Do you have to sell tomorrow? We need to sell it right away. That's the price.
This is, and we're going to have everybody coming. That's not necessarily a bad thing, because there's a good strategy to work on from that point of view as well.
Yes.
And then, where I think the best, well, not necessarily, depends on the situation. The middle price, or where the good range is, I call it the sweet spot. So, we want to be typically when we list a property, we want to be in the sweet spot, so we're not chasing the market.
Okay. So the way you've described comparative market analysis is a completely different purpose from a bank appraisal or an insurance appraisal.
Yeah, the bank just wants to know that they're lending you the money, but it's going to be secure.
And insurance, we're looking at replacement of the house.
Right.
And then comparative market value or analysis is what could we most likely expect.
Yeah.
To sell this thing for.
Yeah, absolutely. And what the bank cares about is, okay, we're lending you $500,000. We need to make sure this isn't a $400,000 home.
Of course.
Right?
Yeah. Because if they have to, in a rare occasion, and the circumstances that they have to foreclose on the property, they want to be able to get their money back.
Right.
Yeah. Or not lose money, at least.
Right. Yeah. At the very least, not lose money. Yeah.
That's awesome. I think that's a great place to cap off those terms.
Okay.
And me bugging you with extra questions.
Okay.
Awesome.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us. Hey, you know what would be great if you take a minute, and we'll feel accepted if you do this, is please like the video, subscribe to the channel, helps us grow the channel, and helps us get the word out there. If you think there's somebody that would be, that would get some good information out of what we've talked about today, please let them know. And I think there's a link there. And if you want to reach out to us, you can do that as well.
Awesome. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you in the next video.
See ya.